There are multiple products that are produced out of beehives, and the first that most people think of is honey. If you ask people to name another product, the next that would probably come to mind is beeswax. And today I'm going to be trying to render some beeswax. In actuality, this is a continuation of my attempt to render beeswax. I have some old comb that I'm going to try to render. Most of it is old wild comb out of trees. So I had previously tried to use a method I've seen a lot of people do successfully, and it didn't work well for me. And that is boiling the wax down in a big pot and letting it cool, coming out with a big round disc of beeswax. And in that process, I took a skimmer and skimmed off some of the slum gum, which is all the crud that's in the wax. A lot of it is the old chrysalis material from the bees when they go through their pupa stage. And then there's all sorts of various stuff that collects on the beeswax that you want to clean out. And so I had tried to use a skimmer to get a lot of that out, let it cool, and what I ended up with is a really dirty puck of wax with a whole lot of crud on the back side. And this was after scooping off a lot of the crud that was already there. This is what I scooped off, pretty big container full of crud and a lot of wax in there too. So as I scooped out all of that stuff, all of these old chrysalises and everything else that was in there, there were some dead wax moth larvae and all sorts of gross stuff. But I have a lot of wax too, and I kind of hate to lose that. So my attempt at at that method was not very successful. That's not to say that method does not work. I have seen a lot of video of people doing it very successfully, coming up with a nice, clean product that only needs a little bit more refining. And they are doing it well. I did not. So I need a little more learning on that approach. But I'm going to try a slightly different method and see if it will work better for me. And that is to try to use a filter to let the wax come through, but to hold all that crud behind. So what I'm going to use as a filter is a cotton pillowcase. I don't think my wife will miss this too much until I can get it back to her, so we should be all right for today. So I'm going to take this cotton pillowcase, I'm going to put all of everything that I scooped off before, as well as the wax I had before, along with some old comb that I found in a bucket that I had missed in my previous attempt. And we're going to put this in the pot, which I have heating up right now. I'm going to hang my filter bag, if you will, over the hot water. In fact, I may dip it in the hot water at first, and then I'll raise it up out of the water and let the wax hopefully drip through. It should be hot enough, liquefied enough that it'll come through. I'm experimenting with this. Let's see what happens. Now, one benefit of doing it this way, since I've already kind of melted it down, I have fairly dense wax instead of the comb that I had before. The comb takes up a lot more space because obviously a lot of it is just airspace. So this is a more dense product, so it's not like my previous attempt was a total loss. It got me something that's usable for this second attempt. So I've got my melted down wax and all that old slum gum with the wax that's in it in my bag. I'm going to grab my old comb and throw it in there. There's just a few pieces. As I put this comb in, because it takes up so much space, I'm kind of breaking it up inside of the bag. So now I've got all that old wax in my wife's pillowcase, and I'm just going to tie this off. Alright, so I've got my knot in the top of that pillowcase, kind of get everything inside of my filter bag here, and I'll use that knot later. I'll put a stick on top of the pot and attach that knot to the stick so that that wax will be suspended over. So now I've got my filter bag, got my knot tied in the top, got a stick, run through that knot, and it's not very elegant, but we'll see if it works. I have to smash this up a little bit to get it down inside of there. There we go. And it's just dipping into the water. I'm okay with that. As it melts down, I'll lift it out and kind of squeeze out what I need to, but I think it's going to work pretty well. Got my filter in there, got my wax inside of the filter. It's all suspended on the stick. I got the lid on upside down because the lid seats down into the pot, and obviously it won't do that with the stick in the way. But I've got the lid upside down so it will hold in a lot of the heat. And now we just wait and let it melt. Water is boiling now. And if we look in here, you can see the yellow there. That's the wax coming through our filter bag, as we'll call it. I am thinking I would like to have it a little higher up above that water, so I should probably either have had a lower water level, or I'll set up some blocks here to raise that up a little bit. But so far, we can see the wax coming through. We see fairly clean yellow. I'm going to turn the heat down. I don't need to have it quite that hot, just have it hot enough to render that wax and let it drip through. And in fact, all the boiling kind of makes a little bit of a mess here, so we'll see if I can tone that down a little bit, keep it just below that boiling point, and we'll raise that up to let that wax drip through. It's turning out to be quite the contraption here. I now have my bag of wax raised up. You can see I've got a couple blocks of cedar on there, 2-inch blocks of cedar, and then some bricks on top of that to raise it up even further. By using the blocks of cedar, I kind of create sort of a lid to help retain some of the heat, and then I've got my bricks, as you see, 90 degrees to that to help form a little bit more of a lid. So we're not letting all the heat out. We want to retain that heat in there so that that wax will melt down. I can't quite see in there to see how much, if any, is still in the water. It raised me up pretty good distance there, so I don't think we'll have a whole lot of our filter bag in the water. And by the way, if you do this, I mentioned earlier that I did use a 100% cotton pillowcase. You want to use a natural fiber like cotton, because if we use polyester, then it would have a tendency, especially where it bumps up against the side of the pot, to melt. So don't want that to happen. And so now we will let it cook a little longer and let that wax melt and drip through our pillowcase. Okay, so our pot has been cooking for a while, heating up that wax, all that junk that's in the pillowcase, and trying to get it to melt through. A little bit ago I actually came and lifted it up. It still has quite a bit of stuff in there. So I'm going to see if I can help this along. It's all soft, it's all heated, and if I just let it go, it would drip through eventually. But I'm going to see if I can give it a little squeeze and squeeze some of that wax on through. Now, obviously this is nearly boiling temperature, and I am not going to grab that with my bare hands. So what I'm going to try to do is lift this up and use these 2 wood blocks and try to squeeze it without scalding my hands. All right, lay that over the side and give it a squeeze. I see some wax dripping out there, so we're getting something done. And what's nice is of course it's filtering through that cotton. So it's just nice yellow wax dripping down through. I'm going to do this on the horizontal here, if I can do it without making it too much of a mess. Squeeze that all. You can see there's some of that wax coming through the cotton. Oh, but it's dripping down my other side too, so that's not working as well as I'd hoped. Getting some wax on that wood. And now it's kind of cooling a little bit, so we'll just get it back in there. Slow and steady. We're getting there. Our water level has lowered a little bit to where I don't need to raise this up quite as much as I had. So we might just let it lower down there. just above the water level. So there, we'll let that, so we got some of that squeezed out. We'll let it keep cooking, and we'll come back on check on it in a little bit. Okay, so I've changed up my strategy just a little bit. Probably should have got this on camera, but that's okay. I'll describe what I did. I came back and kind of gave the whole bundle another squeeze and was getting some wax out. And I noticed it was getting some dark liquid through there. Obviously some of the other stuff was kind of staining the liquid that was coming through. And so I thought, well, maybe a better approach than trying to melt that and let the wax drip down through, which is a very gradual approach. Maybe it'd be better if I submerge that bundle and try to let the wax rise. The wax itself is lighter than the water. This being a turkey fryer pot, it came with this piece that goes down inside that you set your turkey on, has a rod that comes up through the middle, and the bottom of it is perforated. It's an aluminum disc that's perforated, and so I use that to push that bundle down to the bottom, set the board on top of it, set the bricks on top to hold everything down, and so it's kind of underneath except for a little corner that's floating up now. So what I think I'm going to do now is, I've had that under the water for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out, turn off my heat, and just let that sit up above and drip out anything that's left to drip out. I don't want to leave it in there and have the wax harden inside of all that. So I think I've got a pretty good amount of wax on the water here, so that's pretty good. We'll see what we got, and you know, I enjoy experimenting with stuff, so if this doesn't work well, we'll try something new. So here we go. Let's go ahead and pull this out, turn off the heat, and we'll let it cool. What's nice is what I have in here may be a little darker than what I had before, but it's certainly cleaner, so that's a good thing. All right, so now I'll just turn off my heat, let things cool, and we'll see what we come up with. Well, so we've been letting this sit for a while and cool, and it still has a little bit of cooling to do, but I think we're at a point that any wax that's going to drip out of our pillowcase filter has pretty much done. I think it's cooled off enough that it's not going to drip anymore. So let's go ahead and take it out. It's a lot smaller and lighter than it was before. I'm sure we didn't get all the wax out of there. And I think Mrs. Sodbuster is going to be quite pleased that I have waterproofed her good pillowcase for her. And one thing I should mention, and this should be a real clear example, is anything that you use for rendering wax, if you have a pot for rendering wax, it needs to be a committed pot for that. Don't expect to take one of your kitchen pots out, use it for rendering wax, and then clean it up. It's not going to happen. Same thing, obviously, if I had truly been expecting to reuse this pillowcase, I would be in trouble. This is, not going to be cleaned up from all this wax. So, if you use something for a filter, now obviously I can reuse this as a wax filter in the future, but, it's not going to be useful for a pillowcase. So we'll get that out of there. We've got a pretty nice looking disc of wax here that still needs to cool some. I'll get a little bit of video of that, and then we'll let it continue to cool, and I will come out later on and pull that off. Here is our disc of wax that's cooling right now. There are still some dark spots on that. I had mentioned earlier that as I was squeezing that pillowcase to get as much of the wax out as I could, there was some dark liquid coming through. So that may still separate out. If not, I'm not sure how best I'm going to filter out the dark stuff at dark water, but we'll see what it comes out like when it's completely cool. It is a much cleaner product than what I had before. There is a little bit of dirt, debris that's sitting on top, and some of that is probably actually stuff that dropped on there as I was moving the boards off of the top here. But otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. I'm much happier with how it comes out. Once it cools, we'll see what the bottom looks like, and we'll go from there as far as making a final product. When I opened up this pillowcase to look at what was left inside, I'm really pretty pleased with how well the wax was extracted. So the slum gum that's left, it's almost just like, I mean, it's still a little waxy there, but it's almost like a compost texture. There's not a lot of wax residue noticeably in there. So it looks like this did a pretty good job of extracting the wax from that. Maybe I overdid a little bit with squeezing it, that I got some of that dark water out, but otherwise it looks like it was a pretty successful extraction of the wax from all of this junk. If you've enjoyed this video, I appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next video, and check out this other video that Google thinks you'll like. And I invite you to check out my beekeeping playlist to see the rest of my beekeeping videos, learn a little more about the hives that I keep and the progress that I've made with them. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.